Many people are familiar with AFT's iconic green and white bumper sticker, no farms, no food, but know little of the organization that's behind it. American Farmland Trust was created 42 years ago in 1980, and we were the first national organization that viewed agriculture and the environment as two sides of the same coin. Back then, farmers and environmentalists were often at odds, and AFT was formed to pull these two worlds together. Perhaps because we were operating in new territory, we had an outsized impact almost immediately, with passage of the Farmland Protection Policy Act as part of the 1981 Farm Bill. And then AFT formed and led the coalition that incorporated the first conservation title into the Farm Bill in 1985, which in turn has led to all that's happened with conservation programs since then, including, I might say, the game-changing recent investments that Congress have made in climate-smart practices. But AFT didn't only focus on federal policy. We helped 29 states develop farmland protection programs, and we have worked with even more states to adopt or refine current use taxation programs on which so many farmers rely. I could go on and on. My staff sometimes criticize me for that appropriately. But in summary, I'll say that American Farmland Trust has helped permanently protect, at this point, almost 7 million acres of farmland, advanced conservation practices on millions more, and provided support or services that have made a difference in the lives of over 500,000 farmers and ranchers. We take a holistic approach to agriculture, one that involves the land itself, the practices employed on the land, and the people who steward the land. Land, practices, and people, we sometimes summarize it. We're also unique in that we have a strong research arm that we use to guide public policy. Yet at the same time, we do real work out in the field as demonstration projects to ground us in the realities of farming. It's a testament to AFT's success over the years that today, so many environmental groups view farmers as critical partners, essential partners, and that farm organizations recognize the importance of conservation. Now, I apologize to all the AFT members on the phone who already knew all of that, but if you're not a member, I urge you to go to our website and join. It's critically important that we engage as many people as possible, so you know about our latest research, so you can respond to our action alerts. And beyond that, we will make sure you get all of those no farms, no food bumper stickers you want. Now, remember, if you want to call in tonight and ask a message, you can push 0 at any time. I'm looking at the queue. We have close to 5,000 people participating right now, and the numbers are still going up. Very exciting. And I am sure that is because of our special guest. It is a real pleasure and privilege to have U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack with us tonight. He is, of course, someone the agricultural community knows well. He currently serves the Biden administration, but he previously served as secretary for all 8 years under President Obama. And prior to that, he was Iowa's governor for 2 terms, a true public servant. Tom Vilsack is as well-versed as anyone about the challenges and the opportunities facing farming. He joined me for one of these calls back in early 2022, not long after his confirmation, where he outlined some of his plans and priorities for USDA. And tonight, we'll get a chance to talk about how that work has unfolded. Mr. Secretary, so great to have you here.
Hey, John, thanks so much for the opportunity to be with you and those who are supporting the American Farmland Trust. I will tell you that I have on my desk, as I sit and talk to you tonight, that bumper sticker that says no farms, no food. I do. It's green and white. It's a beautifully designed bumper sticker. And I actually have one back home that says no farms, no beer. So either food or beer, somewhat dependent on American farming. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the fact that the American Farmland Trust is one of our lead partners in one of the partnership efforts at focusing on climate Smart Commodities. You are the lead partner in a producer-led collaborative effort to fundamentally transition U.S. beef supply to a carbon-neutral future, and certainly appreciate the work that you will do in connection with that project. Let me spend just a couple of minutes before we get to questions talking a bit about the Climate Smart Commodity Partnership Initiative, because just this week we made a set of additional announcements. We announced, as you know, when we set this up, we had a large grant program that was designed to provide grants of anywhere from $5 million to $100 million that could be invested over a period of 3 to 5 years, focused on climate smart practices being more rapidly and accelerated adaptation on the field, and the creation of climate smart commodities that would be produced as a result of climate smart practices and regenerative practices that in turn would generate a value-added proposition for the producer and the ability of American the food industry to be able to reassure customers that what they were consuming was not harmful to the environment but beneficial. We announced in September 70 projects, $2.8 billion invested in those 70 projects. We had 22 projects receiving somewhere between $5 and $20 million, 25 projects between $25 and $45 million, 9 projects they're receiving between $50 and $65 million, and 14 projects that received somewhere between $70 million and the maximum of $100 million. This week we announced 71 additional projects on top of the initial 70. And these were really smaller projects. These were designed to make sure that producers of all sized operations, producers that historically have been underserved, that wanted to be part of this climate smart effort, but may not have been part of a larger project, that they too could participate in this effort. And so 71 projects. The great news here is the 141 projects investing about $3.1 billion, over 60,000 producers that we know of that will be participating, more than 25 million acres dedicated to these projects, nearly 100 universities and minority-serving institutions that will be charged in part with the responsibility of putting together a monitoring efforts, measurement of the greenhouse gas reduction and carbon sequestration impacts and effects of these practices, so that we're in a position to ultimately develop a system where farmers will receive some financial benefit, either through a higher value proposition with those who purchase the commodity, or the opportunity to qualify for ecosystem service market credits. We also have a number of projects that involve the transition of agricultural waste into new bio-based products that can obviously significantly reduce greenhouse gas and carbon sequestration impacts of farming opportunities and operations. And so we're really excited about this. I mean, there's some terrific projects involving very complicated and interesting partnerships between environmental groups and conservation groups and farm groups and retailers and major food processors. So it's a really, to me, it's a unifying opportunity for agriculture to work collaboratively together. All kinds of production systems are involved in this. All commodities are engaged and involved in this. So it's really an exciting opportunity for a transformational moment in American agriculture. And let me just simply say that this is an incredibly important moment for agriculture. I think for many, many, many years, the message that's been sent to the farming community is you've got to produce more. You've got to produce more. And unfortunately, we didn't focus as much on both the profitability and on the sustainability of these practices. And the result is that still today, too many of the farm families that are farming today are not generating the majority of income that they need to support their families from the farming operation, which requires them to have a second or third job. We can do better. And we also know that there's been obviously some significant loss of soil health over the course of many, many years that has to be reversed if we want to continue to be productive. We think that there is a way through climate smart practices and through climate smart commodities to be both productive, profitable, and sustainable. We think it's a new opportunity to say to farms of all sizes, you now have not 1 or 2 ways to make a living off the farm, but there may be 3, 4, 5, or 6 different revenue streams that now will make it easier for you to do what you love doing and be able to maintain and keep your family on the farm and pass it on to the next generation. So we're excited. I can give you lots of examples. Florida AM, which is a minority institution, has got a biochar climate smart practice focused on specialty crops. The National Black Growers Council is going to work to use regenerative practices suited to the terrain across the United States. We've got the Dairy Farmers of America that are focused on a low-carbon dairy production system that will significantly reduce methane. We've got the Soybean Association working in 13 states to incorporate climate-smart practices. I mean, it's across the board, large and small, and it's just an exciting time here at USDA. We've got a lot to talk about. I know there are a lot of questions, so I'm going to stop there to give us a max amount of time for your questions and for the callers' questions. But I think what you'll see at the end of this hour is that this is a very active USDA, and one that I think is opening up a whole new set of opportunities for American agriculture.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that. And you alluded to the fact that AFT is the lead on one of those grants. We're a partner in 5 others. We're very excited about this program for all the reasons that you mentioned, and it's one of the items I wanted to cover tonight. But there's so much we could talk about tonight, so much that has happened in the 2 years or so since you were here. You know, we've had the pandemic, the war in the Ukraine, in the increasingly tangible impact of a changing climate, and the work that you just described is really unprecedented, game-changing, desperately needed. Many adjectives that I can use. And, of course, the Climate Smart Commodities Program is part of it. But we also just saw Congress pass the Inflation Reduction Act, which in many ways is a climate bill. And a lot of people didn't realize this, but it includes $20 billion to further enhance existing conservation programs. So I'm wondering if you want to speak a little bit about that effort, where you see it going. And then if I may, a lot of these programs are going to be up to NRCS to administer. And NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, arm of USDA, does a tremendous job, but they're going to need more capacity to do this. And we've heard you talk in the past about the need for new kinds of partnerships. And I'm wondering what you envision to help make sure that the new funding in the Inflation Reduction Act gets spent well and smart and fast. Well,
very important questions. And I think part of the answer is the fact that we've already identified individual climate smart practices that we are already seeking to provide assistance and help to, which the Inflation Reduction Act can continue to support, whether it's cover crops or pasture and hay planning, or prescribed grazing, or rotational grazing, or nutrient management, or waste management, or conservation, crop rotation, whatever it might be. There are 45 different factors that NRCS is currently using in order to support climate smart and regenerative practices. And so to the extent that we receive additional resources from Congress from the Inflation Reduction Act, you're absolutely right, it's an historic amount. The goal here obviously would be to continue to support those practices that we know work. Now, the beauty of the Climate Smart Commodity Partnership Initiative is that it's going to give us additional data points. It's going to give us additional understanding of what really moves the dial, what moves the dial a little bit, what moves the dial a lot, what moves the dial not at all. So that we're in a process by learning from the data that will be collected and shared with the world through a series of meetings and convenings and an international climate hub platform that we're setting up to distribute information about all of this to everyone. We'll be able to better focus and better funnel these resources so that we make the best possible use of these resources. At the same time, also other aspects of USDA will be complementing the work of NRCS, whether it's our climate hubs, which this administration has provided additional support for, that is a collaborative effort between the Forest Service and our research arm, as well as NRCS. These climate hubs will continue to provide information to farmers about the climate risk, adaptation and mitigation strategies. Obviously, the conservation dollars in the IRA can basically enhance the direction and assistance that we're providing folks in the future. We've got renewable energy and fuel efforts that I think also will potentially benefit, whether it's digesters or things of that nature. So there's a lot of opportunity here to focus, a lot of opportunity to expand. You ask about how do you get this all done? Well, first and foremost, we've spent the last 2 years beefing up, if you will, boots on the ground, beefing up our capacity at NRCS by hiring more people. Not necessarily an easy task. We're competing in a pretty tight labor market, but nevertheless, the challenge and the opportunity that NRCS provides, the great careers they provide, the great opportunities of working outside with great people is attracting a lot of folks. And so we've hired literally hundreds of new folks to work at NRCS, and we're going to continue that accelerated pace of hiring. One of the reasons why we have the Climate Smart Partnership Initiative, Commodity Initiative structured the way it is a focus on partnerships. We understand and appreciate no matter how many people we hire, we're still going to need help from the American Farmland Trust, from Pheasants Forever, from Ducks Unlimited, from organizations that can also leverage, expand, enhance the work that's being done on the ground by NRCS. We also have our land grant university connections, which we think are also helpful in terms of extending knowledge, extending the information necessary for producers to be excited about what the possibilities are in front of us. So we have no question that we, over the course of the 8 years in which resources have been allocated under the IRA, we have no concern about our ability to get those resources focused, to get them on the ground, to get them doing what we know works and what we know has a significant impact. Here's one challenge. Here's one concern. When you've got a large pot of money, John, in Washington, D.C., especially at this time of year, as Congress begins working on the budget, or as Congress begins next year working on the Farm Bill, there may be a temptation on the part of some to say, well, maybe they don't need $19.6 billion. Maybe they only need $15 billion. And that would be a very, very serious mistake, because I can't think of anything with greater capacity to provide additional revenue streams for farmers, to improve soil health, to ensure water quality, to make sure that over the long haul we remain productive in U.S. agriculture, and to help farmers deal with the immediate consequences and the ongoing consequences of a changing climate, than investing in conservation, investing in these practices that we know work and that we're going to know work well. So we really have to be vigilant in terms of making sure that the intent of this Congress and the promise that this Congress has created by structuring this in a way to be multiple year, that we live up to that promise and that we follow through with that promise. And that's why I've instructed our team to get to work to figure out how best to obligate those resources as quickly as possible for both 22 and 2023, so that we're in a position to get those resources to farmers, get them the information, the technical assistance they need, whether it's through NRCS or whether it's through consultants or whether it's through partners or however it may be, so that it gets to work as quickly as possible.
Oh, that all sounds so great. And I think I used the word unprecedented and game-changing before. And for the listeners out there, this really is. And I couldn't agree with you more. And we will stand by you and fight those fights, if need be, on the Hill to make sure that full amount goes towards these proven programs that we know can do so much good. Of course, Climate Smart Ag, as important as it is, particularly to AFT, is only one of your priorities at USDA. And you've placed a big emphasis on things like supporting historically underserved populations and increasing fairness and competition in the ag sector. Boy, I'm tripping over words tonight. And in ways that connect directly back to AFT's work, USDA has put considerable new resources into business technical assistance and efforts to enhance land access that's so critical to that new generation of farmers. And this is all so forward-looking and exciting. And I just wanted to give you a moment to talk about some of USDA's overall priorities and efforts. How do they respond to agriculture's greatest challenges and opportunities, and which ones, Mr. Secretary, get you the most excited?
Geez, John, you're going to have to give me more than a moment to answer that question. Let me focus on two aspects.
Okay.
Let me focus first on what we refer to as food system transformation here at USDA. Resources from the American Rescue Plan that have been directed to the USDA to help strengthen and support our supply chain in a way that provides assistance and help to producers additional market opportunities. We determined, based on the fact that, as I said earlier, a vast majority of farm families today have to have additional farm income to be able to keep the farm and stay on the farm because they don't get a majority of their income from that farm. So it's important for us to focus on more new and better markets. And part of the strategy behind the Food System Transformation Act efforts is to try to strengthen the local and regional food system, to have it complement the existing system that's been set up. We learned during the pandemic that we had a very efficient food system, but one that wasn't particularly resilient because we had not built up that local and regional system. So we are putting resources behind the development of regional food centers, which will allow folks who are interested in developing food hubs, developing closer connections between farm and school, and farm and restaurant, and farm and grocery store, and farm and institutional purchaser, to be able to learn what programs are available, how they can get assistance, what kind of technical assistance might be available. So we'll be setting up these regional centers, if you will, over the course of 2023. We also recognize the importance of focusing on value-added agriculture. And one of the great value-added propositions is, of course, organic. But the reality is it's tough to transition to organic farming. First of all, you've got to know what you're doing. And secondly, you have to have some technical assistance, some information, maybe even some financial support to be able to make that transition more easily. So we established and set up this Organic Transition Assistance Program where we'll be establishing a series of mentoring opportunities where we'll link those who are interested in becoming organic producers with those who are already organic producers so that any mistakes that were made don't have to be remade by those getting into this. They'll learn from their mentor, and those mentors will be compensated for their time. We're looking at ways in which we can expand market opportunities for organic production. We have, in some parts of the country, a mismatch between supply and demand, and we're going to use resources to try to rebalance the supply and demand. And then finally, we're going to use resources to make it a little bit easier to do the conservation work, to have the risk management tools that you need to have. We're going to provide financial assistance to sort of defray some of the costs associated with those conservation practices that are going to be required and the risk management tools that are necessary to get people through the transition period. So all of that is designed. We, as you well know, we're also engaged and involved in expanding significantly processing capacity in this country. We don't think a resilient system can depend on 4 very large corporations to be the only folks who are in a position to process. And so we're making grants to expand processing capacity. So that's sort of nuts and bolts. There's a healthy food financing initiative that focuses on food deserts. There's an effort to try to look at ways in which we can improve the quality of the food that we're feeding to our children in schools. So many activities associated with this notion of food system transformation. When you combine that with a climate smart commodity production and new market opportunities there, you're beginning to see the more new and better market opportunities that are being created at USDA. The other priority is an equity priority. It's a priority in which we recognize that the USDA, the resources, the capacity of USDA is vast, but it sometimes has not been utilized to its fullest extent by those who need it most. And so we've put together an equity commission with the purpose of taking a look by experts from the outside at the way in which we've done business in the past, to look at whether or not there are systemic issues within the programs we have at USDA that create a greater difficulty for folks who have been historically underserved or unserved by USDA to access programs. You mentioned the importance of technical assistance. And one thing we learned is that, it's tough to know. Let me just give you an example. There are 50 50 different programs that support local and regional food systems in the USDA alone. 50. Now, I've been secretary for almost 10 years, John. I don't know all 50. So how in the heck is any farmer or anybody who's interested in setting one of these up, how would they ever know? So that's why it's important for us to provide resources to groups that have access to farmers, have the trust of farmers, to basically say, look, we know what the programs are at USDA. We can help you understand what they are. And most importantly, we can help you go through the gauntlet that you have to go through in order to be able to qualify for programs. And sometimes it can be a gauntlet. And we're obviously looking at ways in which we can simplify the process. So we've made technical assistance, collaborative agreements, cooperative agreements with organizations that are providing that additional assistance and additional outreach. NRCS has over 100 of these agreements already, and we've used American Rescue Plan with 20 very large cooperators who have access to minority producers and to veterans and to beginning farmers to be able to provide additional support. And we just recently did a number of smaller grants. So we have a pretty wide net that's been cast. We're also using American Rescue Plan resources to look at this issue of land and market access. You know, the reality is, if you haven't been able to fully take advantage of USDA programs in the past, your operation may not have been able to expand as rapidly as maybe your neighbors down the road. And you now are interested in creating new opportunities, but you simply don't know where the land is that you can do that, nor may you be able to afford that. Or you may be in a situation, as many minority producers are, where the title to that land has been carved up in so many different parcels because people died owning the land, but they didn't have a will, and they had sons and daughters, and the sons and daughters had a fractional interest, and they died without a will, and their sons and daughters had fractional interest. And before you know it, it's just very difficult for anybody to prove ownership. So we've established a heirs property program designed to provide resources to able to consolidate the title of land so that people can then qualify for programs at USDA, so that if land does become available, then they're in a position to get a USDA loan, for example. This resource that we put together is going to look at creative ways to identify land that may be available, and also to figure out ways in which we can better link with local and regional food systems these producers to a market opportunity that's more local and more regional, that gives them a fair shot at being able to continue to be successful. Last thing I'll say is that there are some farmers who obviously have had some financial challenges, and so we've established under the American Rescue Plan a debt relief program for those who have done business with the Farm Service Agency in the past when you became delinquent on your loan, when you couldn't make a payment. The reaction ultimately of the Farm Service Agency was, okay, I guess we have to foreclose on the collateral that was provided for the loan. That places the FSA, the Farm Service Agency, and farmers in a conflicting circumstance, right? A circumstance where they're now on opposite sides of the table. Farmer wants to keep the land, USDA wants to collect on the loan. We think there's a better way. We think there's a new way to consider that relationship when farmers get in difficulty. Maybe what we need to be doing is to say, how can we help keep you on the land, instead of how do we foreclose on you? And so we're using this debt relief resource provided under the Inflation Reduction Act to figure out creative ways to loan service farmers who are distressed, farmers who are having financial difficulty, farmers who are in a cash situation that compromises their ability to keep the farm, to try to figure out creative ways to keep them on the land and to figure out ways in which we can help them continue to farm. And to do that, we need to make sure that we have people who work at USDA who reflect the great diversity of our great country. And so we're making a concerted effort to reach out to the younger generation to encourage them to become part of the USDA family. Less than 8% of our workforce is under the age of 35, which means that we've got a whole lot of people that are set to retire at USDA. We need to be able to find new people that are excited about the role and the responsibility of USDA to help out.
That's great. Mr. Secretary, you said at the outset that you hope that people at the end of this call would recognize how this USDA is so active and engaged. And your response to that last question really sets the stage for that and says that in spades. I was particularly excited to hear what you said about heirs property. That's an area where AFT has been putting considerable focus as well, in partnership with groups like the Black Family Land Trust, and it's so critically important. So thank you for your leadership there. I've got one last question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. We have at this point, if I'm reading my computer screen right, 9,422 people who are attending, and yet we really don't have that many questions. So if you have a question, please push 0 on your phone and ask a question, and we're going to get to as many as we can, and it very shortly. But I do have one last one for you, and I want to turn to a topic which is of really critical and growing importance to agriculture, to rural communities, and to the climate crisis. And that is this issue of solar development on farmland. Now, clearly, it is essential that we aggressively increase our solar energy production. Yet the Department of Energy estimates that maybe up to as much of 90% of the 10 million acres of new solar development that's likely in the next decade or so could be sited on farmland, adding to the loss of farmland that is already too great. So we have to be careful here and not replace one form of solar energy for another, namely photosynthesis, right? Simply put, we need it all. We need both to increase solar production and to retain our farmland, especially our most productive and versatile and resilient farmland. Now, at AFT, as you know, we've been working on this issue with several states and many landowners for several years. And more recently, we've partnered with some progressive solar developers who are advancing community-scale solar and embrace what we call smart solar. And what we mean by smart solar, we know that a lot of solar will likely end up in rural communities and on farmland. So let's channel it the best way. Let's prioritize more marginal land and strategies that simultaneously support farming. And in some cases, it may make sense to place smaller solar on a portion of the land and help diversify the farmer's income. And in other cases, there will be opportunities to advance what are called agrivoltaics, where solar panels are placed further apart, allowing for grazing or crop production in between. And you know all of this, but I want to make sure our listeners understand some of these nuances. In any event, there's a lot that's happening with solar, and some of it is concerning, but a lot of it is also very promising for agriculture. And the Department of Energy, not USDA, has historically led this work, including research on agrivoltaics. So my question for you is this: how does USDA view this subject, and how do you envision the department's future role in this space?
Well, it's an interesting question because it can be answered in a number of different ways. It could be answered in the affirmative, that we are excited about the opportunity for solar energy, especially if you're talking about single farm operations where farmers are using the Renewable Energy for America program, the REAP program resources, to install a solar system in their farm, on their farm, to reduce their energy costs and to essentially utilize Mother Nature to provide the power and the energy for their farm. So in that sense, we obviously want to see a continuation. And in fact, the Inflation Reduction Act included significant increases in the REAP program to help. We could answer it in the affirmative as well if we're talking about an REC, a rural electric cooperative, that is interested in transitioning from what they used to use as a fuel source, a fossil fuel source, to more renewables, again, utilizing the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act and the significant historic investment that can now be made in decarbonization the REC, of an REC. And basically, solar could be a strategy, but by no means the only strategy for that REC to take a look at how they may wean themselves off of fossil fuel, which is obviously helpful. So in that sense, it's something that we want to obviously be supportive of. On the other hand, you could also answer it by saying we're not quite sure yet. There's more to learn about all of this, and that's one of the reasons why I was excited. 2 days ago when I was at Tuskegee, when we were announcing the small grant program under the Commodity Smart Ag Commodity Partnership Initiative. One of the programs that we highlighted was a program at the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley, which is a agrovoltaic project where they are taking a look at the use of this solar technology and coupling it with precision irrigation to see whether or not they could utilize those sources to create specialty crops that in turn would be supporting a local and regional food market need. In that sense, we're going to learn from that project, what works, what doesn't work. There are other projects which we know combine livestock production with solar, but in the sense that the livestock is used to maintain the grass levels at an appropriate level so they don't interfere with the capacity of the panels to produce the electricity that are important. I think finally you do have to keep an eye on how, as we use resources from the federal government to support the installation or creation of these, that we really do keep an eye on precisely the location of where they are located. And I think there are ways we can do that. It's sort of like CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program. When we give CRP money, we don't encourage people to take the most productive land out of production. We encourage them to take a look at where is their erosion, where is their the least productive land that could benefit from being from being in the CRP program for a period of time. And so we provide rental rates and incentives and encouragement to use that kind of land in that program. I think we would be sensitive to making sure that we're not compromising the ability to produce product, because our world population is 8 billion today, or 7 billion, I guess, or 8 billion. I guess in the not too distant future it's going to be 9, and then shortly thereafter it's going to be 10. And somebody's got to have to feed these people, and you can't use all your productive land and then be in a position to be able to feed everybody.
Amen, brother. We are with you on that. Let's turn to some questions from participants tonight. I have first a question that about it looks like it's about small food manufacturers from Bicky in Pennsylvania. Bicky, are you there?
Yes, this is Vicki from Adams County, Pennsylvania, and we are considered the apple capital of Pennsylvania here. And real quickly, I heard you talk about the climate issues, and one of the things we've talked about, even at a state level here, is how the East Coast may become in the future the breadbasket of the United States with all the climate change and drought situations that are going on. So keeping that in mind, during the COVID shutdown and all that, we have here in our county, we have a food processing manufacturer, an apple food processing manufacturer that is a growers cooperative model. And one of their biggest challenges, in light of all the labor issues, has been getting their product out. They have the orders. First of all, farmers have to have markets for their commodities, and this is how they actually they have a market for some of their apples here in the county. And this industry, we've done a study on it some years back. It contributes about $580 million to our economy here in Pennsylvania and beyond. So with that said, I'm wondering if the department would consider spearheading some efficiency studies for these small food manufacturers to help them get to the point where they can mechanize and improve their efficiency to actually, produce more, and then also help them perhaps financially to spur retrofits of their manufacturing facilities. In many cases, these are manufacturers who've been around for quite a while.
Thank you.
Well, that's a great question, and the answer is that we are, in 2023, expecting to complement the meat and poultry processing initiative that we announced in 2022 with what we refer to as a competitive food sister or companion project, which is focused on providing assistance and help to improving non-meat and poultry processing, which would include the ability to new equipment, the ability to greater efficiencies. There's also the opportunity through the land-grant university system to potentially access resources from the National Institute of Food and Agriculture to take a look at the efficiency of a particular operation. And I can't miss the opportunity to talk about an effort that we're undertaking in this USDA to better link those small processing facilities and small farming operations with the federal procurement process that's underway. We spend a lot of money, invest a lot of money in the purchase of food for food banks, for schools, and we are now requiring a portion of those resources to be funneled to the states and to have the states essentially use them to purchase from local and regional processing, and not to purchase from the big international or national facilities only, but to also seek out and to create market opportunities using federal procurement dollars for small and mid-sized processing and small and mid-sized farming operations. So there's an opportunity there as well with the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to potentially get some resources. And then there's also a number of programs called the Local Agriculture Marketing Program, and it's basically a program that provides resources to support local and regional food systems, and that may also be a source where a grant could be obtained for retrofitting or providing new equipment, and would encourage the folks in that processing facility to reach out to the Rural Development Director in the state of Pennsylvania. It's located in the state of Pennsylvania, and basically ask for information on the various programs the USDA has.
Rowena from Massachusetts has a question about dairy, a subject that the Secretary knows a lot about. Rowena, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
yes.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. My question for Mr. Vilsack concerns dairy farming, specifically small dairies, organic and non-organic. In I guess the new budget year or any other way you can do it, do you have any plans to increase or propose increasing the dairy subsidy? The basic problem is that, milk is always under-subsidized compared to Canada, and with the combination of situations in the past year or two, the drought, continuing drought, and of course now the war in Ukraine, grain prices have skyrocketed. Milk, as far as I understand, one of the ways one of the elements in the calculation on how much dairy farmers get paid for their milk has to do with the protein content of the milk. And when there's drought, even grass-fed cows, the grass has less available protein in it, and hence the higher need for grain. Grain prices have skyrocketed, and so in order to keep the protein content of the milk high, dairy farmers have to, in situations of drought especially, have to increase the cow's consumption of grain, and organic or non-organic. And so it's a vicious cycle. And the small dairy farmers, which, just to give you and other listeners an idea, I would tentatively define as 200 to 250 cows on the farm or less than that number. They cannot afford the, gigantic costs of grain in the present situation. So unless the subsidies for milk go up significantly, there will be more dairy farmers, small ones, going out of business. More.
So if I may summarize, the question is what can be done at USDA to help some of the smaller dairy farms?
Well, there are a couple things. First of all, we have utilized some of the COVID relief resources and the pandemic assistance relief resources to increase compensation to dairy farmers who have suffered difficulty. So there was a concerted effort. The previous administration had kind of factored and had really sort of targeted the pandemic resources to a very small number of the commodities. And what we did is we basically enlarged it to include additional support for dairy farmers. And as you probably know, John, there is a system in place in which you take a look at what farmers are receiving for their dairy products, and you look at the cost of inputs, and if there is a significant if there isn't a significant gap between the income and the expense, then the U.S. government comes in and provides an additional payment to farmers. And we have looked at ways in which we can and have provided some additional supplemental payments under that system. So that's a kind of a one-time. We're trying periodically to provide the kind of assistance and help. We'll probably likely do a bit more in the coming weeks. Having said that, that's not a total solution. That's not a total answer to the question, and that gets into the whole milk marketing system. And I will tell you that the dairy industry generally is working on reforms to that system that might make it a little bit more profitable, a little bit easier for producers of all sizes to stay in business, and so that's forthcoming. Hopefully.
Great, thanks. I'm going to shift to the subject of industrial hemp, and Sue from New York had a question. Sue, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, Secretary. Thank you for this opportunity. Hemp, yes. So, we used to grow hemp in this country up until the late 40s after the war, until we had Dow and DuPont invent nylon rope and demonized hemp from there on. The cannabinoid hemp growers have this massive waste product after they've harvested the flowers and buds, and that is a stem. And there are 7 other spin-off industries that could use the rest of that plant so that those farmers could gain value for the entire crop. As you know, the cannabinoid crop is sort of boom and bust within 2 years. But one of those industries is mushroom materials. I worked as the founding mycologist of a company in Troy, New York, and the research I did was on replacing plastic foams in the ocean to reduce ocean plastics by growing mushroom buoys. We've since started a 2-year project, and I have a USDA grant and pending an award in February. Thank you very much, to develop that product. But getting hemp requires going to Europe or going to Canada, except for one processor in Kansas. And so it's the processing and separation of the bast fibers, the long fibers from the outside of the stem, to get to the hurd or the pith of the stem for uses such as hempcrete and animal bedding and mushroom materials, which are enormously expansive right now. There's so many different options for that. So what could you do to help either shift subsidies from fossil fuels to helping farmers diversify their crops, as you mentioned earlier, to get hemp processing back into this country?
Well, first of all, there are a number of hemp projects in the Climate Smart Climate Smart Commodity Initiative. I think there are 5 projects that were funded that involve hemp, and there are also several projects that involve sustainable aviation fuel. So there may be a potential opportunity there for hemp. We think there are a number of different feedstocks that could potentially provide the feedstocks for the development of a 35 to 36 billion gallon industry in sustainable aviation fuel. Part of what we have to do, though, is to make sure that we work in concert with our friends at EPA, because they essentially, at the end of the day, make the determination of what is viable, what qualifies for the various credits and so forth that are available that have been supporting the biofuel industry. And as we speak, I don't know precisely what the status is with hemp, but I do know that we have to work with EPA, otherwise they don't get the full benefit. So I think there are opportunities in sustainable. I think there's an opportunity for EPA to take a look at what you've mentioned. I would say that from a processing perspective, there are a number of programs at USDA, loan programs, and potentially, I mentioned the non-meat and poultry processing opportunity. There may be an opportunity to take advantage of that when that gets announced in 2023 in terms of providing resources to build, equip, or construct processing facilities.
Great. We have someone who has a question about potentially altering our federal tax credits for conservation. Arthur from Louisiana, and I'm going to ask, in the interest of time, you keep the question as tight as you can. Arthur, you out there? Arthur?
You probably didn't mean that tight.
Oh, no, didn't. You there, Arthur?
I'm here, and I just wanted to thank Secretary Vilsack for looking to the future for all this stuff. But my question about federal tax credits, I think, underlies everything that is we're talking about in agriculture, and that is conserving land. And I think there's a real disparity in the federal tax code that has never been addressed in the way in which conservation easements are allowed to get tax credits that basically only the very high-end income people and large landowners use. And having served on the board for a land trust for a number of years, what we saw is that if you go to, say, a dairy farmer who's got 300 or 400 or 500 acres and approach them about conserving their land so that another farmer can come on later on, they look at the tax code and they realize that they can't make any sense out of it for themselves financially, because the tax code won't allow them any latitude except to use those tax credits for themselves. And it just seems like what the USDA and others could do, like yourself, is to go involved with the IRS and basically get them to make those tax credits somewhat portable. And by portable, I mean put them into the market where somebody like an Exxon could buy them from that landowner. And Exxon could use those tax credits, or IBM, or any other major corporation. And they could get all kinds of advertising, good news for being green-oriented. But what it would do, it was allow that small farmer to take their tracts of land, put them under a conservation easement in perpetuity, and get the tax benefits for it in cash. Whereas right now, the federal tax code only allows the high-income tax people to get that tax credit and make sense of it. Otherwise, they got to wait for 16 years to get that benefit of that tax credit. And no landowner is going to do that. It's just too.
Arthur, I'm going to stop you there in the interest of time. I think the Secretary probably has enough information to answer. I'll also say this is our bread and butter at AFT. We know a lot about this, and I'll follow up with you separately as well. But Secretary Bill, can you respond?
I suspect you know more about it than I do, John. I would just simply say I don't think it's just us going down to the IRS and having a conversation with folks at the IRS. I think we need statutory authority to do what he's suggesting, and to make it a transferable tax credit and not one that basically offsets the provider of the easement. And that's, getting anything passed with our friends at Congress can sometimes be problematic. But it's an opportunity, I think, to raise the issue during the course of Farm Bill conversations about what strategies, what inducements, what what can be utilized apart from increasing the money available for easements, as was the case with the Inflation Reduction Act. What else can we do to encourage conservation?
Yeah, it's a great point. We need a variety of strategies, and one of the things that AFT has really been stressing is this great work on building soil health through climate smart practices and like is wonderful, but a lot of that benefit goes away if that land is then developed in 20 years, and that the carbon you have sequestered goes back into the atmosphere. So thinking about farmland protection and better practices as a package, as a system, is so important. So it was wonderful funding in the IRA for additional support for the ACEP program, and I couldn't agree with you more. There's a lot of tools that are needed for both incentives and payments for easements, and we need to do more on that. And you're right, the Farm Bill was a place for it. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes for any final comment you have. The time has gone fast. In retrospect, I think I asked questions that were rather long, and I apologize for that. But hopefully all the listeners are going away with a greater sense of the full breadth and intensity of the work at USDA. Before I give you a chance to sign off, I just wanted to thank our guest again, thank Secretary Vilsack for so many things, for his true service to his country, for his heartfelt belief in agriculture, and for the hardworking farmers and ranchers who are out there. At AFT, we sometimes use the term that farming is our future, and clearly, Secretary Vilsack, you feel the same way. I thank you for your commitment, and love to hear any final comments you have.
Well, John, I think we share the strong desire to maintain the land, to improve the quality and productivity of the land through better soil health, to make sure that we have adequate water resources, and that farmers are in a position to make a decent living from what they want and love to do. We know that we have to do better. We know that we have to have more new and better markets. I think there is a tremendous transformational opportunity that is now presented with the resources under the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the work that we're doing with the climate smart efforts, commodity efforts. I think there's a tremendous momentum that is building up in the countryside. And I think if we can find a way to identify the very best strategies, the very best approaches, the climate smart commodity production, and funnel and utilize the conservation resources under that Inflation Reduction Act, I think we're going to see much more profitable farms. We're going to see more processing opportunities in rural communities, so that's additional market opportunities as well as additional rural jobs. I think we're going to see healthier soils, which over time will be more productive soils. We're going to see cleaner water, which creates a whole host of new opportunities from a recreational perspective and can really revitalize the rural economy as well. So I'm really optimistic about things. It's easy to point out the challenges that agriculture faces, but I think there's never been a better time in terms of transformational opportunities than right now. So we at USDA are going to continue to work hard. I think people are going to see a lot of action, a lot of activity in 2023, and I'm looking forward to maybe at the end of 2023 coming back and giving you a report on how well we're doing.
We'd love to have you back. Thank you again, Secretary Vilsack, and thanks to all of you who've listened tonight. And if you're new to American Farmland Trust, remember to go to our website and get one of those coveted No Farms, No Food bumper stickers. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good night.